A recent meeting between India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri and the Taliban's acting Minister for Foreign Affairs in Dubai has made waves in India and around the world. Lots of questions being asked about India and its engagement with the Taliban, a force that it refused to recognize at one point in time. To this day, it does not recognize the government of the Taliban in Kabul. But this highest level engagement that we've seen between India and the Taliban in recent years, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri meeting with the acting Foreign Minister of the Taliban. Joining me now to decode what exactly is happening, why exactly India and the Taliban are choosing to engage each other, is Kabir Taneja of the Observer Research Foundation, who tracks West Asia as well as Afghanistan. Kabir, thanks so much for joining me here on India Today Global. Could you begin by explaining to our audience this meeting between the Foreign Secretary and the acting Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Taliban? What was the motivation for something like this, particularly since India does not recognize the Taliban-led government in Kabul?
Look, I don't think there is any motivation or specific motivation per se. I think it's part of the protracted engagement that India has been doing with the Taliban dispensation in Kabul since 2021, 2022. Till now, of course, we were dealing with them on a joint secretary level, and of course, dealing with them through the technical office, as we call it, in Kabul, where humanitarian issues and developmental issues are still sort of being tabled. So from that perspective, whether we recognize or don't recognize, I think there are a lot of countries that don't recognize, and a lot of countries that have recognized also continue to quasi not recognize the Taliban officially. So the whole recognition debate has been diluted significantly to the point where I'm not sure what recognition with the Taliban mean anymore. If you see the way the UAE has conducted its affairs with the Taliban, they officially sort of welcomed the Taliban nominated ambassador in Abu Dhabi in an official ceremony, but there was no flag of Afghanistan or the Taliban behind him as representation. So, this it's a very open debate right now. What does recognition for the Taliban really mean beyond the point? We have been hearing about, for example, Russia trying to delist the Taliban from their terror listing, and that hasn't happened yet either. So, everyone is working with the Taliban in the gray area, and I think Mishri's meeting with the Taliban is part of that protracted engagement from the Indian side.
Right. Could I ask you then, or draw you into some questions about why exactly India is doing something like this? What exactly India's interests are in working with the Taliban? We haven't had the easiest relationship with the Taliban over the last couple of decades. Some speculation, of course, about India seeking to secure assurances from the Taliban that it will not allow its territory to be used for anti-India activities and terrorism. Some questions about India working with the Taliban to reduce Pakistan and China's influence in Afghanistan. Could you explain what exactly the driving factors or the motivation is for India for working with the Taliban?
Look, there are two fronts to this. I think the first and foremost driving factor, irrespective of what people say specifically on containment of Chinese influence and so on and so forth, that is definitely a concern, but I don't think it's really a core concern at this point of time. What India really cannot afford to do is abandon its years long or decades long effort to cultivate a people to people contact with the Afghans themselves. Just because the Taliban is in power does not mean our relationship with the Afghan people changes dramatically. And maintenance of that is absolutely critical. And maintenance of that without a diplomatic outreach is not possible, because all said and done, whether we like it or not, the Taliban is a reality in Kabul. And if you want to continue your people to people contact, the Taliban has leverages, and the Taliban has the power to cut you off also in Afghanistan. So one way to do that properly is engagement with the Taliban itself. They are very keen with about engaging with India, as we have seen in the past. From their perspective, a stable Afghanistan in any shape or form may not be possible if India is seen as a foe. So they need India, which is the largest country, largest economy, the most powerful economy in the region, not on their side, but at least have some sort of engagement with India as well. So it's not just one way. We have to remember that if there is diplomatic outreach, it's always two ways. So they are also very keen. The Taliban is keen to engage with India, to talk with India. And yes, you were right earlier saying, India is not recognized and so on and so forth, the Taliban regime. Neither did India do that in the 90s, but India still had some sort of contact with the Taliban back then in the 90s as well. So it's not a new model, it's not a new dilemma. It's in some essence just a continuation of the status quo that has been there for a long period of time, and we have to maintain people-to-people contact. So it was good to see that the visas issues may be resolved very soon. I think we should start education and health visas at least, get the Afghan students access to their education here, especially Afghan women. If they wish to study here, we should prioritize that. And the health tourism and health facilities available to Afghans in India was always a big people-to-people ties builder, and I hope that resumes soon as well.
Right. So, would I be right in saying, in some senses, that India's agenda, though, remains fairly limited when it comes to the Taliban? It wants to make sure that, of course, its concerns on security are respected. It wants, of course, there was some conversation between Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri and the acting Foreign Minister of the Taliban, Muttaqi, on the Chabahar port. Of course, that's been a topic of conversation between India and Afghanistan for years. Humanitarian cooperation and aid, which India has also been giving for years. Would it be fair to say that India is really looking at a narrow and limited set of aims when it comes to engaging with the Taliban?
I think for the moment, yes. Even if you see, I'm not actually sure about the numbers, but I think humanitarian aid is also fairly limited at this point of time. It's not going in the same droves as it was earlier through the land corridor, which was operationalized through Pakistan. I think it was just done once. But there are sort of the air connectivity is fairly restored. I think if anyone has to fly to Kabul from Delhi, there are direct flights. There are multiple direct flights. And coming back to the point of, that you have to sort of maintain that people-to-people ties, and there are very limited ways of doing that. It's not a puzzle of any sort. The puzzle here is, of course, that what kind of engagement beyond a point should the Taliban be afforded when it comes to national security issues, right? Domestically, it's not a great look if you are engaging with some entity like the Taliban, but it's a reality, and so the world is also engaging with them. But when it comes to issues such as security, we have to have a conversation with the Taliban on issues such as proliferation weapons. There have been NATO weapons that have been found in Kashmir, for example, in the past year or two, as highlighted by the Indian Army chief. But of course, strategically, the fact that the Taliban is not having good relations with the Pakistanis right now is a space that India can maneuver in a limited fashion. You have to remember that a completely unstable Pakistan being attacked by the TTP or similar entities is also beyond a point a threat to India as well. So there are multiple layers to this, and none of them can be sort of addressed unless you have direct contact with the Taliban.
Right. Kabir, let me ask you another question that you just touched upon, actually. I wanted to ask you about whether Taliban and India can trust the Taliban to respect India's security red lines, ensure that it does not in any way sponsor terrorism or allow its soil to be used for terrorism against India. Can the Taliban broadly be trusted on its assurances on this regard?
I mean, look, the way the Taliban's internal issues are sort of coming up slowly. We saw the assassination of one of the top Haqqani commanders and Haqqani ministers now, sorry. Just very recently, we have seen tensions between Akhundzada and Sirajuddin Haqqani. We have seen that tension flare up just in the past couple of hours over ministerial appointments. It is important to have that access within not just the Taliban, but multiple quarters of the Taliban, that if things do go south, which the probability is always there, that there is minimal impact on Indian national security if those things do collapse within the Afghan or within the Taliban systems. So there are multiple sort of reasons for these kind of outreaches, right? I mean, I know there is a lot of flag waving around or chest thumping around the fact that yes, they are fighting with the Pakistanis, and yes, the Pakistani design has collapsed and sort of bitten them on their own backside, which is all true. But for example, what happens if let's say a Islamist group such as the TTP or one of its alterations, gets close to access to high-end weapons in Pakistan, or gets close to access to, let's say, nuclear programs in Pakistan, and so on and so forth, if the Pakistani states collapse. Those are all issues that are all still on our borders. They are very, so the context of security debate does not just stop at at Afghanistan Pakistan tensions. I think there are broader issues and challenges that need to be addressed, from the smaller ones of weapon proliferation to the bigger ones, of maintenance of some sort of political stability in Afghanistan, so that a civil war is avoided at all costs, which can cost a lot to our borders as well. And it is important for India's security also Afghanistan does not descend into another civil war. That will be very detrimental to our both economic interests and strategic interests. And because currently we are talking to the Haqqanis, we are talking to ecosystems close to Akhundzada and so on and so forth, because they are in a position, or they are trying to sort of have these kind of more statesman-like, for the lack of a better term, outreach to the world. The alternatives to what it is right now may not be as kind in the future as the current one is at least pretending to be. So we are trying to take the best and most accurate, get the best of the offer that is there on the table right now. Because if there is a descent into chaos, there is a descent into civil war, it will be much more harder to control and govern.
Right. Kabir, at the risk of making you repeat yourself, could I ask you to again rehash for our audience what's been happening between Pakistan and the Taliban over the last a year or so? We've seen that Pakistan has accused the Taliban in Kabul of helping the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, of carrying out terror attacks within Pakistani soil. Thousands of people have died over the last couple of years. This has led to dramatic tensions between the two countries. We've also seen airstrikes from Pakistan into Afghanistan. Could you just lay out what we've seen over the last year or two in terms of the steadily ratcheting up tensions between the Pakistan and the Taliban?
Yeah, look, I think there are two fronts to this problem. The first is, of course, that there are border tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which predate the current Taliban dispensation, right? So the Durand Line issue and so on and so forth, that is something that the Taliban has inherited, and those are geopolitical issues that they are continuing to sort of deal with the Pakistanis, as the previous governments were, including Ghanis and including Karzais. It's just that they were doing it a little more diplomatically, and the Taliban is doing it the way the Taliban knows best to do, which is much more kinetic and much more sort of direct. But within that, the second crux of the issue, beyond the border issue, is that the Pakistanis say that the Afghan Taliban is supporting the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the Pakistani Taliban, and they say that the Afghan Taliban is arming them, they are funding them, and that the TTP's leadership resides in Afghanistan, while the Afghan Taliban disputes this and says that TTP, along with others such as the Islamic State Khorasan province, have their anchorings and support bases within the Waziristan and frontier areas of Pakistan, and has nothing to do with Afghanistan. So that's the crux of the issue between the two parties. The TTP has consistently attacked military and police outposts in Pakistan in the recent months, and casualties have been high on the Pakistani side. But the Pakistanis are also simultaneously dealing with the Baloch insurgency, which is also sort of affording a similar kind of casualty figure on Pakistan. So Pakistan is feeling the heat on multiple fronts, and as usually is the Pakistani thing, they would rather look external and blame external issues rather than look internally and try to clean up their own house first.
Right. And how much do you think that the tensions that India and Afghanistan, or the Taliban-led regime in Afghanistan have, the tensions that they have with Pakistan, how much of that is playing into how India and the Taliban are looking at each other right now? Do you think that Pakistan is motivating both sides in some senses to talk to each other, work with each other more closely?
I don't think so. Look, as I said, the Pakistan-Afghanistan problem predates anything, right? The Pakistanis have been blaming India of playing nefarious roles in this particular format for a long period of time without an iota of evidence. And coming back to the point which has been made even within Pakistan, that a lot of these issues are Pakistan's own making, and there are issues that reside within Pakistan's geographic boundaries. Just blaming the other side either way is a very old sort of tactic that the Pakistanis employ, a lot of, if you see the Islamic State Khorasan's initial sort of hierarchies and so on and so forth, they were broken into by the Pakistani intelligence very early in the ISKP's tenure. So it's not like the intelligence or the Pakistani army has no clue about what really is happening. But as I said before, they'd rather blame external forces and external actors rather than clean up their own house first.
Right. And if I could ask you then, in terms of the longer game that Delhi has when it comes to Afghanistan, you said, of course, that in the short term, the agenda is more limited. Is there a long-term vision that India has in terms of what it wants to do with Afghanistan, or is the focus right now on the here and now? What happens in the...
I don't think it's possible to do a very long-term assessment of strategy or policy or with regard to Afghanistan at this point of time. There are too many differences within the Afghan system, within the Taliban hierarchies right now for anyone to really come up with a long-term solution to anything. Even if you see from a Western perspective, they largely concentrated on issues of women's education and so on and so forth. They had stopped sort of trying to dip their toes into the strategic issues too much, because it's very difficult to ascertain what is going to happen next year or next month or within the next 6 months, whether the current dispensation is going to be in the same format that we are dealing with it today. So the best idea or the best way to go about Afghanistan right now for states, with the neighboring states specifically, is to do your personal risk assessments and see what kind of best analysis and information that you can come up with, and deal with it on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's very easy. We have to remember that, yes, Mr. Misri met Muttaqi in Dubai, but all of this, if it dissolves tomorrow from an Afghan perspective, it doesn't matter. It's not too hard for a country like India to just walk away and wait till the next iteration of political stability comes into play. So you don't lose much. But till that kind of sort of stability remains, I think India's core concern is to make sure that its access and availability to the Afghan people is intact.
Understood. Kabir Taneja of the Observer Research Foundation laying out for us what exactly has been driving India-Taliban engagement, this meeting that we've seen between Acting Foreign Minister Muttaqi and Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri in Dubai just very recently. Kabir, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. And to our viewers, please keep watching us for more content like this.